So with the recent surge in, Iranian ballistic and drone strikes targeting UAE infrastructure, how has Emirates Biotech specifically adjusted its risk management for the upcoming Abu Dhabi plant construction?
Well, very good question. What we're starting to do, and again, that's just being prudent, is checking whether the location, because I have to point out here that we already purchased a lot of the equipment, the long lead items from an equipment point of view.
Hello everyone. We are joined today by Marc Verbruggen, the CEO of Emirates Biotech, and a man who has spent over 20 years shaping the global biopolymers market. From the Circle Consortium in Europe to the industrial heart of Kejat in Abu Dhabi, Marc is currently leading the charge to make the UAE a global hub for sustainable materials. Marc, welcome.
Thank you.
We have seen the launch of your M Bio range and your move to Dubai Commerce City, but we are also speaking at a time of significant regional complexity. We are eager to hear how you are balancing this growth with the strategic resilience required in the current landscape. So let's move ahead with the questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So Marc, Emirates Biotech joining the Circle Consortium is a major strategic move. Beyond tech access, what competitive edge does this collaboration unlock?
Well, if you're a PLA producer, your key raw material is lactic acid. And if you look at the cost of making PLA, also in that particular case, the cost of lactic acid is going to be the dominant factor in your overall cost position. So for us being a future PLA producer, it is very important that we keep track of all developments in the world of lactic acid. And that's why I think we were interested in joining the consortium to see whether indeed you could make lactic acid from food waste.
Okay. And how are you reassuring global partners about long-term investment stability while regional tensions are at all-time high?
Well, clearly we have no influence on these regional tensions, and clearly we hope, like everybody else, that in the next weeks or at worst months, these tensions will disappear. Clearly, we're doing this with a long-term vision. We're clearly planning to be here for the next 10, 20 years. So we hope in the end that this turns out to be a very short blip in our long-term presence here in the region. But of course, we're monitoring what's going on. And we're hoping, again, like everybody else, that everything will become back to normal in the next weeks.
Right. So as a Middle East-based company in a European initiative, how does this partnership strengthen you?
Well, as I said, whether we are located here in the UAE or we're located anywhere else in the world, making PLA is a global business. My competitors are all over the world. And from that point of view, if there is new technology being developed anywhere in the world, it is important for us to keep track of it and where it makes sense, participate in it. So for us, again, it doesn't matter whether this technology program starts in Europe or the US or anywhere else. It is potentially important for us.
Right. So with the recent surge in, Iranian ballistic and drone strikes targeting UAE infrastructure, how has Emirates Biotech specifically adjusted its risk management for the upcoming Abu Dhabi plant construction?
Well, very good question. What we're starting to do, and again, that's just being prudent, is checking whether the location, because I have to point out here that we already purchased a lot of the equipment, the long lead items from an equipment point of view, but we have not yet started the actual construction. That actual construction is actually meant to start, let's say, a couple months from now. Well, in today's environment, that construction will not get going. Clearly, it's hard from a logistics point of view, from a people safety point of view. So what we're doing right now is, of course, again, monitoring the situation, but B, also start to look at what our plan B could look like. Let's say you look at a worst case scenario and this conflict drags on or gets worse. Clearly, then you have to start saying, okay, if we can't construct the plant right now in Abu Dhabi, well, what are our other options? Again, these are very early days from that point of view, but as a prudent businessman, of course, you start looking into that. Now, again, our main expectation is still that this thing will ultimately be resolved, and that whether it's a month from now or a couple months from now, we can continue or start with the construction of the actual plant. But today, clearly, ports are closed. Equipment is spread around the world waiting to get to the UAE. The site we have selected, nothing going on at the moment, because we don't have anybody out there. So clearly it isn't helping. But again, hopefully it's short term and will not have a long-term impact.
Right. Marc, correct me if I'm wrong. Samsung E&A contractors are handling the site security in Abu Dhabi plant. I've seen that Samsung uses smart petrol robots and AI guardrails in their other global projects. Are these being deployed in KJAR specifically as a response to the current asymmetric threats?
Not yet. And by the way, the role of Samsung, I have to maybe make clear here, is they have done for us what I would consider the feed work. So the pre-engineering work. Okay. For us, the decision to move forward with Samsung as the actual construction company, the company in charge of construction, is still a decision we need to make. Okay. Now, again, there's other EPC contractors, of course, have similar equipment than Samsung. But again, as of right now, things are just on hold, and we're exploring what our next steps should be.
Okay. So, Marc, scaling from lab to production is never easy. What are the biggest hurdles in turning food waste into bioplastics? And has this conflict accelerated your timeline to find localized feedstock alternatives?
Again, I have to start out by saying that the plant commissioning is scheduled for Q1 2028. So thankfully today, we don't have a plant up and running requiring feedstock. Okay. I agree with you that if we would have a running plant today and we would need to import lactic acid from anywhere in the world, we probably would be shutting down, because clearly ports are closed. It's almost impossible to get material into the UAE. So does it make it more important for us to develop local producers? Yes, but please keep in mind that let's say you build a lactic acid plant here in the UAE, you still need to get corn or sugar as the raw material for the lactic acid plant. So from that point of view, again, the fact that logistics are so difficult, ports are closed, is not helpful for us. It's not helpful for any industry here. Now, getting back to food waste, you could say, well, thankfully, the UAE is still generating a lot of food waste, so that raw material would still be available. That is, of course, correct. But it is going to be quite a while, though, before, and again, the consortium will be doing great work, but there is a reason there is a consortium trying to figure this out, meaning it's not established technology. It's not something you can implement tomorrow. But if indeed it turns out that you can make lactic acid out of food waste in an economic way, in a consistent way, in a sustainable way, then of course we would be less dependent on imports from whether that's corn or sugar or lactic acid. But again, ways to go. And honestly, the startup of our plant in 2028 is not relying on this consortium, the technology of this consortium, meaning we will start out with using traditional lactic acid made from traditional feedstock. So this is looking beyond 2028 as a possible solution.
Okay. So oil versus PLA, since traditional plastics track oil prices, how does PLA compete during volatility? And with maritime insurance premiums for the Gulf surging by over 1,000% this month, how will you maintain price competitiveness?
Well, again, it's you make a business plan and a business model and pricing and things like that based on what I would consider general economic conditions. Yeah. So to say what are we doing in a time of war where the local plastic producers cannot export because the ports are closed and imports are very, very difficult because of the same reasons. Honestly, we are evaluating what's going on here in the general plastics market, and here means the UAE specifically then, of course, yeah, because of the situation we're in. And it's too early to tell what that ultimately will mean. We're also not commercially producing PLA today. So from that point of view, it's not that we have market share to defend or something like that. But yeah, clearly you see a very different environment here in the UAE today than, let's say, in normal times. Yeah, and the fact, for example, that there is already PLA used in the UAE, and that PLA can now not be imported, is already an issue. So we have a small inventory here of material, but honestly, that small inventory is not going to cover the local requirements. So yes, we're having discussions with a variety of converters, customers, and saying, okay, well, what are we going to do during these couple weeks, couple months, depending on how long the conflict takes. And the discussions we're having on a very small scale, again, because PLA here is, of course, very small. I'm sure the bigger players here in plastics have exactly the same condition, the same discussions as to, okay, what are we going to do while this conflict is taking place?
Right. So where is the strongest demand coming from?
So for PLA, one of the great attributes of PLA is that it can be used in a wide variety of applications. Yeah, and if you Google PLA, you're going to see you can use it in food serviceware, you can use it in all kind of packaging, you can use it in 3D printing, you can use it in things like cars, and so some of it is disposable, like what you see in food serviceware and packaging, and some is clearly not disposable if you look at cars. So this wide variety of applications makes PLA so attractive. If you think about why are we interested in PLA, why are others interested in PLA, is that from a cost structure, it's quite competitive versus traditional plastics. And then you have this very broad range of possible applications, right, which ultimately leads to PLA producers having to figure out where to focus their attention. Yeah, because we're literally talking markets which are just in the UAE, for example, the plastic market here is a couple million tons. And we're planning to have a capacity of 80,000 tons, which is, let's say, what, 2% or something like that. So figuring out where you want to sell PLA, what markets to concentrate on, what developments to promote in PLA is actually one of the big decisions PLA producers have to make. And don't forget, the UAE is a relatively small market. If you look at China, India, right, Europe, these markets are even much bigger, and therefore the decision on where to play is even more important.
So are you seeing a flight to safety where customers prioritize materials that don't rely on conflict-prone global supply chain?
That is only going to happen, I think, after this conflict is done. And for example, because now I think most converters are just desperately trying to get the raw materials they need and things like that. So there's not a lot of strategic thinking going on. Understandably so, by the way. So the strategic thinking on whether or not you want to rely on oil and gas as your feedstock for your business, whatever that business might be, is, I think, a strategic discussion which is going to happen when this conflict is over. And by the way, not just here in the region. I think that's a discussion you're going to see on a much broader scale. Because again, if the price of oil goes up, almost immediately the price of all the plastics go up. We're kind of reasonably independent from that, because we use corn or sugar as our feedstock. Now, over time, those prices tend to go up too, and that is often through ethanol. But still, they lag. So today, indeed, the price of PLA is probably cheaper than the price of polystyrene or PET, looking at the situation of oil being over $100 a barrel. Now, how consistent is that? What will happen with the oil price if this conflict is over? These are all very good questions. But the fundamental discussion or the fundamental, let's say, strategic thinking of, do I want to have my business linked to something as volatile as oil, and how easy it is to actually cut off the supply of oil? It's an important strategic decision for people to make. Again, not just here in the region, but literally globally.
So let's talk about your long-term pricing strategy. How are you factoring the current war risk premiums into your long-term pricing strategy for the MBio range?
For us, though, but that is true for our customers too. We're all professionals in this business. So the fact that oil is $100 a barrel today because of the conflict going on is, from my point of view, is not a big factor in the long-term thinking on PLA pricing. For us, what we're trying to do is figure out what type of premium is realistic, looking at the value proposition of PLA and the fact that it's a more sustainable product, the fact that it has a very low carbon footprint, but also the fact that for certain applications, it's actually a superior product from a mechanical properties point of view versus traditional plastics. And as every business person does, we're trying to figure out what value do you create with PLA versus traditional plastic, and how you can monetize that. And honestly, of course, we will follow what's going on with the price of oil or the price of natural gas. But this longer term question is what type of premium one can expect for a product like PLA is much more important for us. Because let's be practical, whether it's 2 weeks from now or a month from now or 3 months from now, this conflict will be over. The price of oil will reduce again to whatever the level is. And you're not going to make your long-term pricing analysis based on, again, what is ultimately going to be a short period of time. That's true for us. And honestly, that is also true for our customers.
Exactly.
They're not suddenly going to switch to PLA because for a 3-month blip, the price of oil is very high.
Which makes
Clearly,
sense.
there is more strategic thinking behind it.
Right, which makes a lot of sense, yes. Let's discuss the production and technology. So what makes your production approach stand out, specifically since Iran's offensive has recently targeted utility grids, regional utility grids? Is the Abu Dhabi plant being designed with localized off-grid energy solutions to prevent production hits?
So, of course, our utilities, just like any other plant here in the region, will clearly be local, and we will, depending on the local infrastructure for things like wastewater, for things like electricity. Now, again, we do our own steam generation like most of the local companies here do. So from that point of view, the impact we see the most, or we would see the most, would be in the whole logistic systems, as we already discussed. Yeah, once your
Right.
ports are closed, then of course input of raw materials, export of finished products suddenly become a big problem. And that is clear now for everybody here in the region, and I'm sure for everybody else in the world. So from that point of view, as Emirates Biotech, ultimately building a PLA plant here, the impact is limited, I think, for the UAE though, and looking at, okay, how secure are my ports? How secure is my energy? These are big questions, but again, not necessarily for us as one producer in the UAE, but for the government. Yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty of people looking into that as we speak. Again, I have to make clear here, our plant is only planned to start up in 2028. Yeah, so we're not producing today. Right. So clearly we are trying to figure out what this all means for the future. But thankfully, yeah, we're not being impacted today from a manufacturing point of view.
Right. So Marc, is the waste to plastic model practical now that, agriculture feedstock imports are facing severe bottlenecks at the ports?
Honestly, if there is an issue with, if there's a question around food waste to PLA or food waste to lactic acid, it's technology development. Yeah, clearly the technology is not yet ready to be scaled up, has not yet demonstrated that the economics are right, that the consistency is there. Ultimately, that's why you have a project. Yeah, I mean, Europe would not be funding this project if the technology was ready to go and ready to be scaled up. There are still a number of questions which need to be answered, and they will be answered in the next couple of years. And we will gladly play our role in helping to answer these questions. But no, tomorrow, if you would ask me, can you start up a PLA plant from food waste? No, tomorrow we would not be able to do that. 5 years from now, potentially, hopefully, we will find out. So it's still a technology development project. Yeah, it's not a scale-up project yet. Yeah, so there's still quite a bit of work to do to demonstrate that the technology actually works.
Right, right. So let's discuss research and innovation. How are you investing in research to stay ahead?
Yeah, again, these are things like you have many balls in the air and you have to try to do a bunch of things at the same time. Clearly, our main activity right now is getting the plant engineered and built and ultimately operated. But clearly, one can never forget about R&D. So one of the things we have done is make sure that we are building and engineering, a PLA plant with 2026 technology. Because please don't forget that the first PLA plant was built 20 years ago. Yeah, so if you would look at that plant versus the plant we're building today, clearly from a technology point of view, there's quite a bit of improvement, both on the processing side, but also the product which actually comes out of the plant. Now, beyond that though, because that is just building a plant and making sure you get good products coming out of the plant, beyond that, clearly we're looking from an R&D point of view, what will the next generation PLA look like? And that is not necessarily the product which we will produce in 2028, but the product which comes after that. I believe you're going to see an announcement, and I can't make the announcement today, but you'll see an announcement in the next 30, 45 days. Okay. Where we're actually expanding our R&D capabilities significantly. And again, that is looking towards a future beyond 2028, because that announcement will not lead immediately to better products and things like that. But it's setting us up for, let's say, the medium term beyond 2028. So please keep following press releases, because I expect one in the next 30 to 45 days.
Right. So my next question was about any exciting partnership you are coming up with. So perhaps involving automation or digital tools. Can we talk about anything as such?
Nothing which is public right now, but Emirates Biotech and the shareholders of Emirates Biotech plan to be one of the key PLA players in the world. From that point of view, there is a lot going on in different parts of the world, whether that's process development, potential new applications, potential product development. And we're keeping an eye on that. Yeah. So nothing to report today, but we are clearly one of those parties who keep track of what's going on. And if there is a good opportunity, we clearly will be ready to participate in it. But again, as of right now, nothing to report.
Right, right. So are we close to a point where sustainable plastics become mainstream?
I guess it all depends on how you define mainstream. Yeah, let's say big numbers. There is today probably 200-300 million tons of plastic being produced every year. If you look at PLA today, that's probably 500,000, 600,000 tons being produced. So tiny versus the massive annual plastic production. So do I expect PLA to grow into the millions of tons? Let's say 5 million, 6 million, 10 million tons. Yes, yeah, and you're going to see that regionally, and you're going to see quite a bit of activity. Does it mean you have mainstreamed PLA then, if it's still only, let's say, 5% or 10% of the total plastic consumption? Again, that's the definition. But I think what we're going to see over the next couple of years is if you go from what I would call a very interesting, almost embryonic activity, if you compare it in the whole global plastic world, to now a place where PLA is considered a viable alternative for a lot of different applications. Now, in some cases it might work, in other cases it might not. In some regions of the world it might be more attractive than in others, but it's not gonna be a novelty, like it was 5 years ago or 6 years or 7 years ago. So whether you call that mainstreaming or not, again, it depends on definition. Now, is PLA going to take whatever 50% of all plastics? I don't believe it will, but it will be much more sizable than it is today.
So, in your view, does the current crisis delay or actually accelerate the global transition to circular materials?
I think it all depends on how long the crisis will last. Yeah, if it lasts a couple more weeks.
Okay.
And then, of course, the logistic impact will be a couple more months after that.
Right.
Then I think the impact on thinking about a circular economy will be less. Meaning, it's not that we stop thinking about it. It's not that it's going to change the way we think about it. If this continues for a while, and let's be practical, if you have, let's say, a plastics operation in a number of countries around the world, and you depend on oil or gas being delivered to your crackers, and that oil and gas isn't coming or is now becoming so expensive that, the economics don't work anymore, then, of course, the idea of making plastics from a feedstock which is decoupled from oil and gas becomes a lot more interesting and a lot more important. But then again, for that to happen, you would always have to see this conflict continue into next year, because then people will start making long-term strategic decisions on what to do or not to do. The circular economy as such, from a sustainability point of view, that is not going to change. Whether there is a conflict here or not, I think this is a much broader issue. It's a global issue. And things like microplastics are suddenly not going to be more or less important because there is a conflict here in the Middle East. The issues around recycling, the issues around composting, these things are, let's say, broader than a conflict, and clearly will be as important after the conflict is over than before the conflict started. But the economics of it all, yeah, clearly, if this thing drags on into next year and the oil price is consistently over $100 a barrel, people will start looking at the economics of plastics and say, okay, do we really have to start seriously looking at an alternative
yes,
from oil and gas? But then again, building a PLA plant takes 3 years. Yeah. So it's not that you make a decision tomorrow and then 2 weeks later there's your new PLA plant. These are long-term strategic issues, but that people will start wondering about it. Yeah. If now again, if it takes another 2 weeks, then as I said, it's going to ultimately be a blip, and everything will get back to normal fairly quickly. But if not, yes, then of course there could be a longer-term impact.
So, Marc, looking beyond the immediate Iran offensive, do you believe the UAE will emerge from this conflict as a more self-reliant, circular industrial hub, or is the green agenda at risk of being sidelined?
No, because if I look at Dubai, and again, I've lived in the region now since 2024, so clearly I'm not a long-term resident of the UAE, but I've been here now for, let's say, 18 months. And of course, I talked with a lot of Emiratis in different positions in the government and industry. For them, if you want to call it a green agenda, a low carbon footprint, ultimately developing industries different from oil and gas, doing something about their landfill issues, doing something about their food security. Honestly, that is not going to change because of the present conflict. I even expect, now again, that's me talking, that's not the UAE government talking, but I'm even expecting that when the conflict is over, again, whether that's a month from now or 6 months from now, that the UAE, which was in such a growth pattern, I mean, you almost have to live here to see and feel the amount of growth in the UAE and in places like Dubai. Clearly, that has been slowed down now. Yeah, you don't have tourists now. You don't have a lot of new expatriates coming into the country. You don't have a lot of new investments at the moment. Right. So that I think if and when the conflict is over, that the UAE will use that opportunity to actually strongly stimulate new investments. And how they're going to do that, I don't know. Yeah, but they clearly have a growth mindset, and they really want to develop the UAE as really one of the global hubs from a sustainability point of view. And rather than changing the approach, they might actually further stimulate the approach if and when the conflict is over. Now, again, that's not my decision. That's the decision of the UAE government. But that's kind of what I expect, yeah, because this incredible growth from the UAE, whether it's investments or people or tourists or whatever it might be, which has clearly now come to a kind of sudden halt. I think they're going to do everything they can to get that back going as quickly as possible, again, if and when the conflict is over.
Marc, my final question, so where do you see Emirates Bioplastics 5 years down the line?
Well, hopefully we're going to have at least one, maybe two PLA plants by then. And at some point, we might start looking at more broader expansion of our PLA business beyond the region. If you look at the region, I think, and the region is more than the UAE, let's say the GCC countries, right, I think could easily absorb, let's say, 2 PLA plants, maybe even 3 PLA plants. At some point, I think Emirates Biotech would start to look beyond just the GCC. And what that means, too early to tell. But I think PLA is a great candidate to truly become a global product. And you already have PLA plant in China, you have PLA plants in Thailand, you have PLA plant in the US. But it's a big world. Yeah? There is no PLA plant in the Indonesia or the Philippines or Egypt or any of these places. So I think at some point, and whether that's 5 years from now or 7 years from now or whatever, I think a company like Emirates Biotech will start exploring the world beyond the GCC. After, of course, having done quite a lot of work and build a lot of infrastructure right here in the region.
Right. So thank you, Marc. Navigating these regional shifts while staying committed to your green agenda is a massive undertaking. We appreciate you pulling back the curtain on the Emirates Biotech is staying ahead of the curve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.